Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are stepping into one of the most enduring mysteries in the history of aviation. It is a story about courage, ambition, and a disappearance that has puzzled the world for more than 8 decades. It is the tale of Amelia Earhart, the legendary aviator who inspired millions, and whose final flight has never been fully explained. Before we get to the mystery, let us take a moment to understand who Amelia Earhart really was. Born in 1897 in Kansas, she grew up at a time when the sky was still considered the domain of men. Flying was dangerous, experimental, and very few women dared to enter that world. But Amelia was different. From the very beginning, she showed a spirit of independence and a desire to push beyond limits. Her passion for aviation led her to become one of the most recognized pilots of her generation. She was not just any pilot, she broke records and barriers that seemed impossible for women of her time. In 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, a feat that catapulted her into international fame. Newspapers hailed her as a hero, and young women everywhere looked up to her as proof that no dream was out of reach. But Earhart was more than just a record breaker. She was also a writer, a speaker, and a voice for women's equality. She encouraged women to enter fields that had traditionally been closed to them, insisting that courage and determination were not defined by gender. To her supporters, she was not only flying airplanes, she was flying against society's expectations. By the mid-1930s, Amelia Earhart had become a global icon. Yet she was never content with what she had already achieved. She wanted to do something greater, something that would leave a permanent mark on history. That ambition led her to her most daring goal, to become the first woman to fly around the world. The challenge was enormous. Flying around the globe in the 1930s was far more dangerous than it might sound today. Navigation technology was limited. Radio communication was unreliable, and vast stretches of ocean offered no margin for error. But for Earhart, these were not obstacles, they were opportunities to prove what human spirit and skill could accomplish. So when she announced her world flight in 1937, the world watched with admiration and anticipation. The newspapers followed her every move. Children studied maps to trace her progress, and her fans believed she would once again defy the odds. Amelia Earhart was not just another pilot attempting a record, she was a symbol of progress, determination, and courage at a time when the world desperately needed it. Little did anyone know, however, that her greatest adventure would also become her greatest mystery. By 1937, Amelia Earhart had already secured her place in aviation history. But her eyes were fixed on something larger, something that would push the boundaries of human achievement even further. She wanted to circle the globe, flying across oceans, deserts, jungles, and continents, to become the first woman, and one of the very few pilots of any gender, to complete such a daring feat. To achieve this dream, she needed the right machine. That aircraft was the Lockheed Electra 10E, a twin-engine plane that was sleek, powerful, and specially modified for long-distance flight. Its metallic silver body gleamed under the sun, earning it the nickname the Flying Laboratory. It was outfitted with extra fuel tanks to stretch its range, state-of-the-art navigation tools for the time, and reinforced systems to endure the punishing conditions of intercontinental travel. But even with the best aircraft, Amelia knew she could not take on this mission alone. She would need an expert navigator, someone who could read the skies, the stars, and the ocean currents when maps and compasses failed. That person was Fred Noonan, a highly skilled navigator with years of experience charting transoceanic flights. Noonan had worked for Pan American Airways and had a reputation for guiding planes safely across some of the most treacherous routes on Earth. Together, they would form a team that combined her fearless piloting with his unmatched expertise. The plan was ambitious, a nearly 29,000-mile journey that would circle the globe near the equator. This was not the shortest path around the Earth, it was one of the longest possible routes. Designed to prove not just endurance, but mastery of aviation. The route would take them from the United States to South America, across the Atlantic to Africa. Then eastward through India and Southeast Asia, before finally crossing the vast Pacific Ocean back toward North America. It was a route filled with peril. The distances between some of the stops were enormous, particularly the Pacific leg. The weather could be unpredictable, and the navigational equipment of the 1930s lacked the precision we take for granted today. Even the most minor miscalculation could send a plane hopelessly off course. But Amelia and Noonan accepted the risks, knowing that great achievements always come with great challenges. The journey began in earnest from Oakland, California in March 1937. But after an early setback involving a ground accident that damaged the Electra, the attempt was postponed. Undeterred, Amelia regrouped, repaired the plane, and restarted her world flight later that year, this time heading eastward. By June, Amelia and Fred had already crossed the Atlantic, Africa, and the Indian Ocean, logging thousands of miles and countless hours in the cockpit. They had battled fatigue, navigational hurdles, and the constant stress of pushing their aircraft to its limits. Yet with each successful landing, they grew closer to the finish line and closer to writing their names in history forever. As the summer of 1937 unfolded, Amelia Earhart stood on the edge of greatness. She had already completed most of her journey. All that remained was the most dangerous stretch of all. The Pacific Ocean. Ahead lay tiny islands scattered across thousands of miles of open water, and among them was a pinpoint of land called Howland Island, a speck in the ocean that would become the most critical destination of her life. The world was watching. Newspapers tracked her progress daily, radios broadcast updates, and her supporters held their breath. Amelia Earhart, the fearless woman who had already broken so many barriers, was now racing against time, weather, and fate itself. By the dawn of July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were poised to complete one of the most critical and dangerous legs of their world flight. The journey from New Guinea to the remote Howland Island in the Central Pacific. This leg was over 2,500 miles of open ocean, with no landmarks and almost no margin for error. The island itself was barely 2 miles long, little more than a speck in the vast Pacific. Missing it by even a few nautical miles could mean disaster. As they lifted off from the Lockheed Electra 10E was heavily loaded with fuel, designed to give them just enough range to reach Howland. Witnesses on the ground described the takeoff as steady but heavy, the plane straining under the weight of its long-distance fuel tanks. For Earhart and Noonan, this would be the defining test of their skills, her ability to keep the aircraft steady, and his ability to navigate with near-perfect accuracy. But the Pacific skies did not make it easy. Reports suggest that the weather was unstable, with layers of clouds and patches of rain reducing visibility. Celestial navigation, which Noonan often relied on, became nearly impossible under these conditions. Without clear views of the sun or stars, he had to depend heavily on dead reckoning, calculating their position by speed, time, and direction. Meanwhile, radio communication became another obstacle. Amelia's Electra was equipped with radio equipment, but the technology of the 1930s was notoriously unreliable. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca had been stationed near Howland Island, tasked with guiding her in through radio signals. Yet throughout the flight, miscommunications plagued the operation. Amelia's transmissions were often faint or unclear, and sometimes she could not hear the Itasca's replies. Frequencies did not always align, and in some cases, atmospheric interference made signals nearly impossible to interpret. What should have been a lifeline guiding her to the island instead became a source of confusion. As the hours passed, Amelia's voice grew more urgent. At one point, she reported, "We are on the line 157 to 337. We will repeat this message. We are running north and south." These words suggested she and Noonan were flying along a navigational line, desperately searching for the island but unable to spot it. Another transmission conveyed the growing crisis. She indicated that they were low on fuel and struggling to make visual contact with Howland. For the crew of the Itasca, listening helplessly, these final messages painted a picture of two aviators fighting against time, technology, and the immensity of the ocean. And then, silence. After those final words, no further communication was ever received. The Lockheed Electra, Amelia Earhart, and Fred Noonan vanished into the Pacific skies. The exact location of their disappearance has never been determined, and no confirmed wreckage has ever been found. For those who had followed her journey around the world, it was a heartbreaking moment. Amelia Earhart, the fearless pioneer who had inspired millions, had simply disappeared. In a single day, what was meant to be her crowning triumph became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. When Amelia Earhart's final radio transmission faded into silence on July 2, 1937, the world shifted from eager anticipation to anxious alarm. The most celebrated woman in aviation had vanished, and the stakes could not have been higher. Within hours, the United States government mobilized what would become the largest search and rescue operation in American history at that time. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca, already stationed near Howland Island to assist Earhart, immediately began scanning the surrounding waters. They fired up their radio equipment, sent out distress calls, and kept their eyes glued to the horizon, hoping to catch a glimpse of the silver Lockheed Electra. But the skies and seas remained empty. Soon, the search expanded. The U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Lexington, accompanied by multiple destroyers, was dispatched to the region. These ships, along with seaplanes launched from their decks, scoured tens of thousands of square miles of the Pacific. From the air, pilots looked for floating debris, oil slicks, or even life rafts. From the sea, sailors scanned endlessly, day and night, hoping for any sign of the missing aviators. The operation lasted more than 2 weeks. Planes crisscrossed over 250,000 square miles of ocean, an area larger than Texas. It was a staggering effort, involving advanced resources for its time. And it captured headlines across the globe. Newspapers printed daily updates, families gathered around radios for the latest reports, and the world waited for good news. But despite the intensity of the search, no trace of Amelia Earhart, Fred Noonan, or their plane was ever found. Not a wing, not a fragment of metal, not even a floating personal item. The ocean seemed to have swallowed them whole. The failure of the search left investigators with few options. The most logical conclusion was that the Electra had run out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific Ocean, sinking quickly into deep, unforgiving waters. But without evidence, that conclusion could never be more than speculation. For Earhart's family, friends, and admirers, the lack of closure was devastating. She was more than just a pilot, she was a symbol of courage and progress. To imagine her lost without a trace was almost unbearable. Even President Franklin D. Roosevelt expressed sorrow at the disappearance and praised the extraordinary effort made to find her. By mid-July, the Navy scaled back the official search, though smaller efforts continued. Eventually, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were declared lost at sea. But the unanswered questions lingered. Where exactly had they gone down? Could they have survived the crash, at least for a time, on some remote island? For the American public and indeed, for the entire world, the lack of closure only fueled curiosity. If the ocean could keep its secrets so tightly, then the mystery of Amelia Earhart would not simply fade away. Instead, it would ignite decades of speculation, theories, and countless attempts to uncover the truth. What began as a story of triumph, the near completion of a world flight, had now transformed into one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The search had ended, but the legend of Amelia Earhart was only beginning. With the official search called off and no wreckage recovered, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan quickly became fertile ground for speculation. People simply could not accept that one of the most famous women in the world could vanish without a trace. As a result, theories, some plausible, others more sensational, began to circulate almost immediately. The most straightforward theory was also the one the U.S. government leaned toward, that the Electra ran out of fuel somewhere near Howland Island and crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Earhart's last radio messages indicated that she was low on fuel, struggling to locate the island. Given the vastness of the ocean and the difficulty of navigation, it seemed logical that she and Noonan simply missed their target, descended into the waves, and were swallowed by the sea. The Pacific in that region plunges to extreme depths, which would explain why no wreckage was ever found despite extensive searches. Yet for many, that explanation felt incomplete. This led to the second major theory, that Earhart and Noonan survived the flight but landed on a remote island after missing Howland. The most discussed candidate was Gardner Island, now known as Nikumaroro, part of the Phoenix Islands. Some researchers argued that the Electra might have been able to glide to this coral atoll, where the pair could have survived for a time as castaways. In later decades, small artifacts such as pieces of metal, fragments of shoes, and even human bones were reported on the island, though none could be definitively proven to belong to Earhart or her navigator. Still, the idea that Amelia may have lived out her final days as a stranded survivor continues to capture imaginations. Then came the most controversial theory, that Amelia Earhart was captured by the Japanese military. According to this speculation, Earhart may have strayed far off course and landed in the Marshall Islands, which were under Japanese control in 1937. Some claimed she and Noonan were taken as prisoners, suspected of being American spies. Over the years, anecdotal stories surfaced of islanders recalling the presence of a foreign woman pilot. Some even alleged that photographs showed Earhart alive in Japanese custody, though none have ever been authenticated. This theory, while lacking solid evidence, gained traction during and after World War II, fueled by tensions between the United States and Japan. Beyond these main theories, more imaginative ideas also circulated. Some believed she had secretly assumed a new identity and lived in the U.S. quietly, unwilling to return to the spotlight. Others suggested the disappearance was part of a covert intelligence mission gone wrong. A few even leaned toward science fiction, speculating about supernatural forces or otherworldly explanations. What all of these theories revealed was not just the mystery itself, but the emotional weight of Amelia Earhart's disappearance. People wanted closure. But in the absence of proof, the void was filled with possibilities. Each theory reflected both the hope that she might have survived and the fear that her end was more tragic than the public wanted to imagine. In the years immediately following her disappearance, these theories kept her story alive. The world was not ready to let go of Amelia Earhart. She was too iconic, too symbolic of courage and progress, to simply vanish without answers. And so, the search for truth continued not just in official investigations, but in the imaginations of millions. As the decades passed, Amelia Earhart's disappearance refused to fade into history. Instead, it grew into one of the most heavily researched mysteries in aviation. From the 1940s to the present day, investigators, scientists, and enthusiasts have searched for answers, using both traditional detective work and cutting-edge technology. One of the earliest intriguing developments came in 1940, when British colonial officers on Nikumaroro Island, then called Gardner Island, discovered human bones, along with a sextant box, parts of a shoe, and other scattered items. At the time, the bones were examined and dismissed as belonging to a man. The artifacts were set aside, and the possibility that they were linked to Earhart faded into obscurity. Decades later, however, modern forensic re-examination suggested the measurements of the bones could have belonged to a woman of Earhart's build. Unfortunately, the bones themselves were lost, leaving only reports and measurements to analyze. In the late 20th century, new groups reignited the search. The International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery (TIRE) became one of the leading organizations pushing the Nikumaroro hypothesis. Over the course of multiple expeditions, TIRE uncovered a number of tantalizing artifacts, fragments of metal consistent with aircraft aluminum, pieces of glass believed to be from a woman's cosmetic jar, and other small items that hinted at a female presence on the island. Perhaps most hauntingly, researchers also studied radio transmissions reported in the days after Earhart's disappearance. Some suggested these faint signals may have been distress calls made from the Electra after landing on Nikumaroro's reef. Beyond Nikumaroro, other theories continued to evolve. In 2009, underwater search teams began using sonar and deep-sea submersibles to scan the ocean floor near Howland Island. These searches, though technically advanced, came up empty, reinforcing the belief that if the Electra had sunk, it lay far deeper than current technology could easily reach. In 2017, another headline-grabbing moment emerged when a photograph was uncovered from U.S. archives, allegedly showing Earhart and Noonan alive on the Marshall Islands after their disappearance. The photo fueled renewed speculation about the Japanese capture theory. But experts quickly cast doubt on its authenticity, suggesting the image had been misdated and misinterpreted. Modern DNA science has also been applied to the case. Some artifacts believed to be linked to Earhart have undergone testing, but so far, no conclusive results have emerged. For example, DNA sampling on suspected personal items like hairbrushes and letters has proven challenging due to contamination and age. The bones once found on Nikumaroro remain a major missing piece. If rediscovered, they could potentially provide the definitive answer through DNA analysis. Despite these efforts, no universally accepted proof of her fate has been found. Every new discovery seems to open more questions than it answers. Did the Electra rest on the seabed near Howland Island, hidden by the ocean's depths, did Amelia and Fred survive? Even temporarily, on a desolate atoll before succumbing to the elements, or was there a deeper, more complex story lost in the politics of the pre-World War II Pacific? What is undeniable is the persistence of the search itself. More than 80 years later, Amelia Earhart's story continues to inspire expeditions, documentaries, and cutting-edge science. Few mysteries command such dedication across generations, and few figures have left such an enduring imprint on both history and imagination. Even after decades of failed searches, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart continues to inspire both serious investigation and public fascination. In the modern era, new technologies and renewed media attention have breathed fresh life into the mystery, ensuring that her story remains a subject of global interest. One of the most widely discussed modern theories remains the Nikumaroro hypothesis, advanced primarily by Tyre and its researchers. Using ground-penetrating radar, forensic imaging, and advanced mapping, expeditions have continued to probe the island and its surrounding reef. Each trip produces new fragments of evidence: aluminum panels, remnants of shoes, or tools that could plausibly be linked to Earhart. But none of it has yet provided the definitive smoking gun. Critics argue that the artifacts could just as easily have come from other sources, such as World War II debris or colonial-era settlers. Another modern theory leans heavily on oceanographic technology. Sophisticated sonar mapping and robotic submersibles have allowed researchers to scan the seabed at extraordinary depths. Some expeditions have targeted areas near Howland Island, suggesting the Electra may have crashed into the ocean and sunk intact. Private companies, along with wealthy enthusiasts, have funded multi-million-dollar searches, yet each time, the results have been inconclusive. The Pacific Ocean, vast and unforgiving, remains the greatest adversary to finding Amelia's plane. At the same time, the Japanese capture theory still refuses to die. In recent years, television documentaries have re-examined alleged photographic evidence and eyewitness accounts from the Marshall Islands. Although historians have debunked many of these claims, the theory thrives in popular imagination. The idea that Amelia Earhart could have been entangled in pre-World War II geopolitics is both dramatic and alluring, keeping it alive in books and documentaries. Meanwhile, advances in forensic science and DNA analysis continue to raise hope for breakthroughs. If skeletal remains on Nikumaroro or elsewhere in the Pacific can be rediscovered, modern DNA testing could finally confirm whether they belong to Amelia or Fred Noonan. Even personal items, such as letters she wrote or known hair samples, are being revisited with new techniques that were not available decades ago. Each development sparks headlines and speculation, even if the results remain inconclusive. Beyond the scientific and forensic side, Amelia's mystery thrives in the world of media and culture. Every few years, new documentaries, podcasts, or books promise to crack the case. Popular shows like Expedition Unknown or National Geographic specials dedicate episodes to following the latest leads. In the age of the Internet, online communities of amateur sleuths pore over old maps, radio logs, and expedition reports, hoping to be the ones to connect the final dots. And of course, Amelia Earhart herself has become a symbol that transcends aviation. Her image appears in films, television shows, and even video games, often representing courage, freedom, and the eternal quest for discovery. The unresolved nature of her disappearance makes her story endlessly adaptable to new audiences. What is striking is how the mystery endures not just because of who she was, but because of what she represents. Amelia Earhart was not just a pilot, she was a trailblazer. A woman who defied expectations in a time when society placed many limits on her gender. Her disappearance amplifies that legacy, turning her into both a real historical figure and a mythic character. In today's world, where technology continues to shrink the unknown, Amelia Earhart stands as a reminder that some mysteries remain just beyond our reach. And perhaps that is why the fascination endures, not only because we want answers, but because deep down, we are drawn to the very existence of the unknown. Long after the final search planes returned empty-handed, Amelia Earhart's story refused to fade. Instead, her disappearance became more than a historical mystery, it transformed into a cultural legend. Across books, films, art, and even politics, Earhart's name has endured as a symbol of bravery, independence, and the eternal human quest for discovery. From the very beginning, the media played a powerful role in shaping her image. Newspapers in the 1930s had already celebrated her as Queen of the Air and Lady Lindy, drawing comparisons to Charles Lindbergh. After her disappearance, those headlines shifted into something far larger. They painted her as a lost heroine, someone who dared too greatly and vanished while pushing the boundaries of possibility. That narrative has endured for generations. In literature, countless biographies, novels, and historical accounts have been written about her. Some focus on her achievements, while others dramatize her final days, weaving fiction into fact to keep the story alive. Children's books often portray her as a role model, emphasizing her courage and determination. For young readers, she remains a figure who proves that limits can be broken. Hollywood has also kept her legend alive. She has been portrayed on screen by stars like Hilary Swank in the 2009 film Amelia, which dramatized her life and final flight. Documentaries ranging from unsolved mysteries to National Geographic specials have explored every angle of her disappearance, turning her into a recurring figure in the world of true crime and historical mystery entertainment. Even animated shows and popular series like Doctor Who and Night at the Museum have included references to her, ensuring that even audiences with no prior knowledge of aviation recognize her name. In music and popular culture, her name is often invoked as a metaphor for courage or the pursuit of freedom. Songs, poems, and even video games reference her as an adventurer who defied the odds. In American culture especially, she has become shorthand for a pioneer, someone who looked at boundaries and chose to cross them. But Amelia Earhart's cultural impact extends far beyond storytelling. She became an icon of the women's movement, representing progress at a time when gender equality was still far from reality. Her accomplishments in aviation were not just personal victories, they symbolized what women could achieve in fields dominated by men. Even today, women in aviation and aerospace cite Amelia as an inspiration, and scholarships and foundations bearing her name continue to support young women pursuing careers in science and flight. Politically and socially, Earhart's legacy has also been invoked by leaders and educators as a reminder of resilience and ambition. Her courage is often used as an example in classrooms, motivational speeches, and campaigns aimed at empowering women and inspiring young people to pursue their dreams without fear. The power of Amelia Earhart's story lies in its dual nature. On one hand, she was a real person, an aviator who achieved extraordinary things through skill, determination, and vision. On the other hand, the mystery of her disappearance elevated her into the realm of myth. She is remembered not only for what she did, but for what remains unknown. That combination, achievement and mystery, ensures her place in history and imagination alike. In the end, Amelia Earhart is more than a missing pilot. She is a symbol of courage, a trailblazer for equality, and a cultural icon whose name will continue to inspire long after the mystery of her final flight is either solved or left forever unsolved. Even in the 21st century, more than 8 decades after Amelia Earhart's disappearance, the search for answers has not stopped. With each new wave of technology, investigators and explorers have returned to the Pacific, convinced that the mystery is just one discovery away from being solved. Yet, despite massive efforts and millions of dollars spent, the case remains as elusive as ever. One of the most ambitious recent efforts came in 2012, when the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery (TIRE) mounted another expedition to Nikumaroro Island. Using advanced sonar, underwater drones, and divers, the team scoured the reef where they believed Earhart's Lockheed Electra might have landed and then slipped into the sea. At one point, sonar readings suggested the presence of a large object consistent with an aircraft. Excitement spread across the globe as headlines proclaimed a possible breakthrough. But when experts reviewed the data, the evidence proved inconclusive. In 2017, another expedition drew global attention when explorers announced that bones originally found on Nikumaroro in 1940 had been reanalyzed using modern forensic techniques. This new study argued that the skeletal measurements matched a woman of Amelia Earhart's height and build. While tantalizing, critics pointed out that the bones themselves had been lost decades earlier, meaning the conclusions were based only on old notes and data, not physical remains. Without DNA testing, certainty was impossible. Meanwhile, deep-sea exploration has brought its own share of hope and disappointment. Companies equipped with state-of-the-art submersibles and sonar mapping systems have launched missions to explore the ocean floor near Howland Island. These expeditions scan thousands of square miles, often at depths of more than 15,000 feet. While they occasionally identified promising shapes or anomalies, nothing conclusive has been recovered. The Pacific, vast and unforgiving, continues to guard its secrets. Beyond professional expeditions, Earhart's story has also sparked countless independent searches by private explorers, researchers, and even television crews. High-profile documentaries on networks like History Channel and National Geographic have funded their own hunts, combining scientific exploration with dramatic storytelling. Each time, public interest spikes, and for a moment it seems as if the case might finally be cracked. But time and again, the mystery slips through investigators' fingers. So why, despite all of this effort, does the mystery remain unsolved? Part of the answer lies in the sheer scale of the Pacific Ocean. The area between New Guinea, and Howland Island is immense, dotted with tiny islands and surrounded by some of the deepest waters on Earth. Even with today's technology, searching that vastness is like hunting for a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is the size of a continent and the needle may no longer exist. Another factor is the ambiguity of the evidence. Artifacts found on Nikumaroro could belong to Earhart, but they could just as easily come from other sources. Skeletal remains reported in 1940 were lost before modern science could confirm their identity. Even the infamous photograph supposedly showing Earhart alive in the Marshall Islands was quickly discredited. Each clue seems to raise as many questions as it answers. And yet, that uncertainty is part of why the fascination endures. If definitive proof were found, the story would end. But in its absence, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart remains alive, inviting endless speculation, debate, and new theories with every passing decade. In the end, the 21st century searches have brought us closer to understanding the possibilities but not the truth. The Pacific still holds its secret. And Amelia Earhart's final flight remains one of history's most enduring enigmas. After decades of searching, three main theories have emerged as the most widely debated explanations for Amelia Earhart's disappearance. Each offers compelling arguments, yet each carries flaws that prevent it from being the final answer. Together, they highlight why the mystery has endured for so long. The first and most straightforward theory is that Earhart and Fred Noonan simply ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific Ocean near Howland Island. This was the conclusion reached by the U.S. government shortly after the disappearance. And it remains the most logical explanation to many experts. Earhart's final radio messages mentioned low fuel and difficulty locating the island. The vast ocean, unpredictable weather, and imprecise navigation made this outcome highly likely. The strength of this theory lies in its simplicity. It fits the evidence we know. The weakness, however, is the complete absence of physical proof. No wreckage, no debris, and no human remains have ever been confirmed, despite intensive searches. If the Electra did sink, it may rest in water too deep for current technology to locate. The second major theory is the Nikumaroro hypothesis, which suggests Earhart and Noonan landed on the reef of Nikumaroro Island, about 350 miles southeast of Howland. Supporters of this theory point to several intriguing clues. Artifacts found on the island, such as pieces of metal possibly from an aircraft, fragments of shoes, and even reports of human bones discovered in 1940. Radio distress calls, allegedly picked up in the days after the disappearance, also strengthen the possibility that Earhart may have survived temporarily on the island. The advantage of this theory is that it accounts for both the lack of wreckage near Howland and the possibility of survival after the flight. Its weakness is that none of the evidence has been conclusively tied to Earhart or her plane. Critics argue that the artifacts could belong to later settlers or unrelated events. And the bones were lost before DNA testing could provide certainty. The third prominent theory is the Japanese capture theory, which suggests Earhart and Noonan veered far off course and landed in the Marshall Islands, then under Japanese control. According to this idea, the pair may have been taken prisoner, suspected of being American spies. Some witnesses later claimed to have seen a foreign woman pilot in the islands. And photographs have occasionally surfaced, purporting to show Earhart alive under Japanese custody. The strength of this theory lies in its dramatic appeal and its connection to pre-World War II tensions in the Pacific. However, historians and researchers largely dismiss it due to a lack of verifiable evidence. The photographs have been discredited, and no official Japanese records mention holding Earhart. Beyond these three, smaller theories persist. Some suggest Earhart returned secretly to the United States under a new identity, while others drift into the realm of science fiction. Yet none have the traction of the main three. When comparing them, the ocean crash theory remains the most practical, the Nikumaroro theory the most hopeful, and the Japanese capture theory the most sensational. Each satisfies different aspects of the human imagination, the tragic, the survivalist, and the conspiratorial. But none provides closure. Which is why the debate continues. Ultimately, what keeps these theories alive is not only the lack of evidence but also the fascination with Amelia herself. People do not just want to know where the plane went down, they want to believe that a woman so courageous and determined met an ending as extraordinary as her life. 80 years after Amelia Earhart's disappearance, the question remains, why does her story still resonate so strongly with people all over the world? Countless other mysteries exist, yet few have captured the imagination of the public in quite the same way. The answer lies not just in the disappearance itself, but in what Amelia Earhart represented and continues to represent. At its core, her story is about human ambition and courage. Amelia was not simply flying airplanes. She was challenging the expectations of her era. In the 1930s, aviation was still a dangerous and male-dominated field. For a woman to step into that arena and not only compete but break records was extraordinary. Every flight she took carried symbolic weight, proving that boundaries could be pushed and stereotypes could be broken. When she vanished, she became more than a pilot, she became a symbol of daring humanity itself. Her disappearance also endures because it is the perfect blend of fact and mystery. The facts are compelling enough: a record-setting aviator, a world flight nearly complete, the final radio messages. And then silence. But the mystery, the absence of wreckage, the unanswered questions, the conflicting theories is what keeps the story alive. People are drawn to puzzles, and Amelia's story is a puzzle with just enough pieces missing to ensure it will never truly be solved. Another reason is the emotional connection. Amelia Earhart was not just a pioneer. She was also charismatic, articulate, and relatable. She wrote books, gave lectures, and openly encouraged others, especially women, to pursue their dreams. When she disappeared, it felt personal to many. The world had not just lost a pilot, but a role model. That sense of collective grief, mixed with admiration, helped cement her legend. The mystery also endures because it offers something for everyone. For scientists and historians, it is a challenge of evidence and logic. For adventurers, it is a call to continue the search across uncharted oceans and forgotten islands. For storytellers, it is a rich narrative filled with suspense, courage, and uncertainty. And for ordinary people, it is a reminder that even in an age of progress, some questions remain tantalizingly beyond our grasp. Amelia's legacy also lives on in the broader cultural and social context. She has become an enduring icon of the women's movement, celebrated not only for what she did but for what she symbolized. Her determination and achievements continue to inspire young women to enter aviation, science, and leadership roles. The scholarships, foundations, and monuments in her name ensure that her influence stretches far beyond the cockpit. Finally, the story of Amelia Earhart appeals because it embodies the duality of triumph and tragedy. On one hand, she was on the brink of completing one of the greatest feats in aviation history. On the other, she vanished without closure, leaving her final chapter unwritten. That tension between success and mystery makes her story timeless, bridging generations and cultures. In a world where technology explains so much, Amelia Earhart's fate reminds us that the unknown still exists. And perhaps, deep down, people are not sure they want the mystery solved. Because as long as it remains unsolved, Amelia Earhart is not just a figure of the past, she is a legend that continues to fly in the imagination of the world. And so, after retracing Amelia Earhart's life, her daring achievements, and the countless theories about her disappearance, we return to the same haunting question that has lingered for more than 8 decades, what really happened on that final flight? The truth is, we may never know. Perhaps her plane lies at the bottom of the Pacific, resting silently in the deep. Perhaps she and Fred Noonan touched down on a remote island, surviving for a time before history swallowed their trail. Or perhaps her fate is forever lost to time, carried away in the winds of that July morning in 1937. But one thing is undeniable: Amelia Earhart's story is not defined by how it ended. It is defined by how she lived. She was a pioneer who defied gravity, defied expectations, and defied the limits placed upon her. She inspired a generation to dream bigger, to challenge convention, and to believe that the sky was not the limit, but only the beginning. Her disappearance may be an unsolved mystery, but her legacy is a lasting triumph. She reminds us that courage often comes with risk, that ambition sometimes collides with uncertainty, and that legends are born not only from answers, but also from enduring questions. In Amelia, we see both the fragility and the greatness of the human spirit. And now, I would like to hear from you. What do you think truly happened to Amelia Earhart? Do you believe she crashed into the Pacific and was lost forever? Or do you lean toward the Nikumaroro survival theory? Or even the Japanese capture idea? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective adds to the ongoing conversation that has kept this mystery alive for generations. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Amelia Earhart's life and disappearance, please give this video a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss future episodes where we explore more of history's greatest mysteries. From unsolved crimes to forgotten legends, we will continue to uncover the stories that remind us how fascinating and how mysterious our world can be. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of aviation's greatest enigmas. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and keep wondering. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that leave us without answers.